So, should you stop creating? And I mean, right now in 2025 going into 2026, when anyone could generate anything instantly, is it still worth it to make things yourself? And I guess I mean traditionally. Honestly, I never really asked myself that before, but this year things have felt very different for me creatively. I've been on YouTube for the past 5 years and it's gone by so fast. I started this channel during the pandemic right after getting laid off. I was in a pretty fun creative role, but it wasn't really hands-on and I miss that. So this channel became my way back in. It was a place to learn, experiment, and just get back into making things again. And it was fun because I had never edited a video before. I was trying new things and I was connecting with people who had similar goals. But as I put more time into it, things naturally shifted. Monetization inevitably became part of the picture. I had to think about my direction, how it was going to be sustainable, and how it fit into my career. And going from a pretty stable 9 to 5 to relying on yourself and your energy, it was scary. But I don't regret it because I needed to give myself a chance and actually build something that I wanted to make. And throughout everything, the constant was that I loved what I was doing because I was creating. Now, I've never really seen myself as a content creator. I think that word pretty much describes anyone online at this point that uploads. For me, YouTube was simply the best place to scratch the creative itch and slowly build something of my own. So last year, I started developing my own properties like Little Maxwell, Theo, and my shop. And that's always been the dream. But even with all that excitement, there was something deeper underneath the surface dampening my desire to create. Because this year, I barely uploaded. Last year, I posted around 25 videos, and this year, around 8. And yes, I was busy. I had a contract project that took up a huge portion of my time. But if I'm being honest, I've always juggled things when I really wanted to. So the real question was, why wasn't I creating? And the truth is, this year I was trying to figure out what creating even means in 2025. What's the value of craft when Gen AI can produce something in seconds? And I know that sounds cliche, but when AI is everywhere, social media, studios, job listings, it's impossible not to think about it. And the whole AI is just a tool argument is way more complicated than it sounds. There's no unified standard for how it's being used creatively. I've followed AI since I started this channel and have been trying to find ethical ways to implement it. I even have old videos where I trained models on my own artwork as datasets. And the conversation around AI changes every single year. The truth is, no one knows where it's actually heading. Not the studios, not the creators, not even the companies building the technology. But the unifying sentiment is that it's going to replace. Some people are selling generated art as the product, some are avoiding AI completely, some treat it like a shortcut, some treat it like a threat. It's pretty much all over the place. And that made it harder for me to figure out where I fit into that landscape. I never wanted to quit creating, but I did have to sit with the question of what creating looks like today and why my interest was wavering. And honestly, being on social media didn't really help. If you've seen my video about it, you know how I feel about those platforms, specifically Instagram. Social media has always had a superficial side, but it used to be a place to genuinely connect because it was social. But now it leans almost fully into the superficial with trends, recommended formats, things designed to go viral. It actually, in my opinion, limits creativity, and when you add generative AI on top of that, suddenly everything feels more fake, templated, and focused purely on the end result. So I took a step back, and after taking that break and actually sitting with all of this, I realized something. I'm not going to stop creating, and I don't think anyone should. Because what a lot of people misunderstand and what I think actually gives work its value is the creative process and what's made during it, not the output, the process. That part feels forgotten right now, but it's still pretty significant. And yes, the way we make things might look different next year, but the reason we make things doesn't have to. If you've been wrestling with the same question or wondering what all this means for your hobby or for your career, here's why I still believe creating matters even as everything shifts around us. As a creative, when you see what generative AI can put out, it's scary. The images, the videos, the stuff coming from Sora 2, it's a lot, and it's mainly because it can create something acceptable in seconds. Sure, you can pick it apart like the 7 or 6 fingers, the weird proportions, but the fact that it can generate anything at that level at all is already impressive. I remember when I was experimenting with text-to-image models, and at that time, it was kind of primitive. This was like 2 to 3 years ago, and now we can create pretty hyper-realistic results. And it's only going to get better. It really is Moore's law. The more things advance, the faster each jump happens. And I've been following the generative AI conversation from the start, and at some point, it starts to feel like what you're doing is futile. What's the point of it if AI can just generate something instantly? But because AI is everywhere and inundating our feeds, I started to wonder, who is this for? Because at the rate that AI-generated content is being put up on these platforms, the only thing that can keep up with it is another AI. Everything might look pretty, but it starts to look the same. Pinterest is the biggest example of this. There are millions of images that look exactly the same with tiny variations, and after a while, it just dilutes everything you're looking at and you start to feel desensitized. So it made me take a step back and rethink why I create in the first place, and it brought me to one of the most polarizing questions ever, which is, what is art? If that has ever stumped you, you're not alone, because questions like that are vague on purpose, and they can make people who aren't really creatively inclined feel shut out. But the way I've always seen it is simple. Art is communication. Some people use words, some use actions, and some of us communicate through things we make. And that's where the creative process comes in, because it's where you figure out what you're actually trying to say, and the final result is just the message that comes out from that. So this is something that everyone can understand, maybe not on an obvious level, but a subconscious one. So when you make something for someone, a drawing, a meal, something handmade, it says something. The effort and the intention all become part of that message. And on a bigger scale, when a studio makes a film or a game, the final product reflects hundreds of people making thoughtful choices under that shared direction. So all of that intangible and invisible decision making is reflected into the result. Most of the time though, we're not thinking about the message. We just care about whether something looks good, because that's the part that everyone can see. And that's normal, especially when it's a product that we're paying for. And it's even more obvious in business, where creative work becomes a commodity. It's marketing, branding, communication. That's why so many companies are using generative AI for advertising, because it produces something fast, it communicates instantly, and it disappears just as quickly. But the creative process is where you build the foundation for anything meaningful. It's where your vision forms, what you intend to say, what your values are, and what your direction is. It shapes how you communicate something in a way that resonates and connects with people, not just visually, but emotionally. Now, meaning itself is pretty abstract. You can't point to it the same way you can point to the visual parts of an image, but the intangible choices you make during the process still matter. They drastically guide the final result and are a huge part of why something leaves an impression. And you can sometimes see this online. So how you create directly shapes who connect with your work. The thoughtfulness that you put in is the same thoughtfulness that people pick up on, consciously or subconsciously. So in this sea of work that's fast, disposable, and generated in seconds, the things made with intention are going to stand out. Not because they're perfect, but because they carry meaning. So the human part is what gives things value, and that's why the creative process still matters. So what really pushed me to make this video was just being on social media. AI generated content is everywhere now. You can't really escape it. You have generated music hitting #1, you have generated art winning contests, and even generated ads from major companies, and it's only going to increase. It's pretty clear we're in this weird moment where no one really knows how generative AI is going to be accepted, regulated, if at all, or integrated long term. And naturally you start wondering, what does this mean for me? Or you question your own values. And that's happening across the board, from small creators all the way up to huge companies. And I know people are trying to figure out how to adopt AI in a way that makes sense for them, but there's so much discourse because the conversations that should be happening aren't. Some people have huge ethical concerns and others don't really care at all, and it's nonstop. Now, it's worth noting that not all implementations of AI are the same. There are so many tools that genuinely make workflows smoother or help you learn faster, and honestly, if you've ever used it in a strategic context, it works for ideating, but it can't really come up with anything genuinely new or visionary. It just pulls from what statistically makes sense based on data or whatever exists. That might change eventually, but right now, it made me realize that the human creative process is still where true innovation happens. And that idea, using AI as a tool, I think that's what most people originally hoped for in creative work, but not everyone is using it that way, and the general sentiment from creatives right now is that it's just going to replace them. And that's a huge life shift to think about, especially when you genuinely love what you do. What makes this whole thing even more complicated is that the direction isn't really being steered by anyone. Governments aren't really regulating it in any meaningful way yet, and I think that's partly because they don't want to hinder or slow down progress, and then partly because maybe they don't fully understand the implications. And yes, companies are trying to adopt it, but no one is really aligned on how it should actually be used. It feels like everyone is just gauging public reaction, so they see the discourse happening and then are just waiting to see where the wind blows, or if it blows over at all. And so that ends justify the means mindset might feel efficient right now, but it has real consequences for the workforce, for the creative industry, for everyone in general. Meanwhile, everything online is becoming oversaturated because generative content has such a low barrier to entry. And as more of it floods every platform, I really do feel like the rubber band is going to snap at any moment. It might make headlines now, like going #1 on the country music charts, but because it's so accessible, I think that the use right now will end up feeling more like a novelty and a trend than something meaningful. I feel like AI in the context of going viral or capitalizing only works when you're the only one who really knows about it, but now everyone does. And I guess maybe this is why everyone has such an arms race mentality. If I don't do it first, someone else is going to do it. Now, on the topic of the rubber band, you can already see it. People want work that feels intentional and human again. Audiences are craving authenticity, even if the social platforms aren't designed for that anymore. And all of that made me realize how important the creative process actually is again, because that part can't be replaced. So while all this is happening, it shouldn't affect your desire to create, because meaning, true innovation, and what actually lasts still comes from you and not the model. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them below. Thanks again, and I'll see you all in the next video.